gas at the pump. If President Trump wants to usher in a new golden age for the United States, the better path is to partner with Canada, not to punish.
Did you know that parts of the U.S. depend on Canada for electricity? That's right. Canada has been quietly powering entire regions of the U.S. for years. But here's the twist. As tensions rise, Canada might just flip the switch and cut off that power. Imagine entire states facing blackouts. How did we get here? And what's Canada planning next? Stick around to find out, because this could change everything. You won't believe what's happening. In late 2024, something unusual happened during a private dinner at Mar-a-Lago. Donald Trump, who was the president-elect at the time, made a surprising suggestion. He turned to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and said, "You know, Canada would do a lot better as America's 51st state." The comment left the room silent for a moment. Nervous laughter filled the air as most people assumed Trump was just joking.
Why would we pay $200 billion a year in subsidies to Canada when they're not a state? You do that for a state, but you don't do that for somebody else's country. So I think Canada is going to be a very serious contender to be our 51st state.
But Trump didn't stop there. He went on to claim that under U.S. rule, Canadians would pay fewer taxes and have access to a much better health care system. Trudeau, trying to keep things light, smiled politely and likely brushed it off as just dinner table banter.
Mr. President, how are the negotiations ongoing with Canada? There was obviously a delay in implementing those tariffs.
I spoke to Governor Trudeau on numerous occasions, and we'll see what happens. But it just sets up so good for them. Look, the people would pay much less tax than they're paying right now. They'd have perfect military protection. They don't have any military protection because and you take a look at what's going on out there. You have Russian ships, you have China ships, you have Chinese ships, you have a lot of ships out there. And, you know, people are in danger. This is a different world today. It's a different world. They need our protection.
However, Trump wasn't done. A few days later, he posted on social media, calling Trudeau Governor Justin Trudeau of the great state of Canada. This post went viral, sending people into a frenzy. Was Trump serious? Was this just another one of his off-the-cuff comments? People couldn't stop talking about it. What started as a seemingly playful comment turned into something much bigger. By December 18, 2024, Trump made another bold claim. He said many Canadians actually supported the idea of joining the U.S. He didn't back up this claim with any proof, but that didn't stop his followers from running with it. The media went wild, and what had seemed like a joke now felt like a real political issue. In January 2025, things took a sharp turn. Donald Trump, who was still heavily influencing U.S. politics, made a huge announcement. He said that unless Canada tightened its border security, the U.S. would slap a 25% tariff on all Canadian goods. It was a big move that sent shockwaves through both countries.
I want to speak directly to Americans, our closest friends and neighbors. This is a choice that, yes, will harm Canadians, but beyond that, it will have real consequences for you. Tariffs against Canada will put your jobs at risk. They will raise costs for you, including food at the grocery store.
Trump's reasoning was simple. The U.S. had been subsidizing Canada to the tune of $300 billion. Essentially, he argued that the U.S. was giving Canada too much support, and in return, Canada should fall in line. If Canada didn't, then the U.S. would make things harder by imposing these steep tariffs. Trudeau didn't back down. In a press conference, he firmly stated there was no chance in hell that Canada would ever become part of the U.S. He made it clear that the idea of merging with the United States wasn't something Canada would even consider. His response was a clear rejection of Trump's pressure tactics.
We won't back down. That if tariffs are implemented against Canada, we will respond. We won't relent until tariffs are removed and, of course, everything is on the table. I won't sugarcoat it. Our nation could be facing difficult times in the coming days and weeks. I know Canadians might be anxious and worried, but I want them to know the federal government, and indeed all orders of government, have their backs. That was the topic of conversation 2 days ago when I had a First Minister's meeting with all premiers.
He clearly declared if the United States wanted a better path, it was to partner with Canada, not punish them.
Gas at the pump. If President Trump wants to usher in a new golden age for the United States, the better path is to partner with Canada, not to punish us. I am announcing Canada will be responding to the U.S. trade action with 25% tariffs against $155 billion worth of American goods. We will stand strong for Canada. We will stand strong to ensure our countries continue to be the best neighbors in the world.
But Trump didn't stop there. He went back to social media, as he often did, to push his agenda further. On platforms like Truth Social, he argued again that Canada would benefit greatly from becoming part of the U.S. He claimed it would lead to lower taxes, a better healthcare system, and stronger economic growth. His posts caused a stir, but Trudeau's response remained strong. Canada was going to continue standing its ground. The pressure was on, but Canada was far from folding. Would the U.S. keep pushing, or would this trade war take a different turn? That's where the story gets even more interesting. That's not it. Canada wasn't just going to sit back and accept the pressure from the U.S. In response to Trump's 25% tariffs on Canadian goods, the Canadian government fired back with its own set of tariffs, targeting $155 billion worth of U.S. imports. That's a huge chunk of the American market. Canada slapped penalties on $30 billion worth of direct trade, including some major industries like steel and aluminum, which the U.S. heavily relies on. It was a clear message. If the U.S. is going to hit Canada with tariffs, Canada was ready to strike right back. But the retaliation didn't stop there. Canada knew that just relying on tariffs wouldn't be enough. They started to explore other ways to hit back. The Canadian government began looking for ways to reduce its dependence on the U.S., especially when it comes to energy. And that's when things got really interesting. Canada was ready to hit the U.S. where it hurt, in its energy supply. Ontario Premier Doug Ford warned that Canada might have to cut off electricity exports to key U.S. states like Minnesota, Michigan, and New York if the tariffs weren't lifted. The thing is, these states depend on Canadian electricity. Around 1.5 million Americans rely on this power to keep their homes and businesses running. If Canada followed through, it would create a serious energy crisis in these regions. The U.S. could face major blackouts and power shortages, something they definitely want to avoid. But Canada wasn't stopping there either. They realized it wasn't just about fighting tariffs anymore. It was about shifting their entire trade focus. Instead of relying so heavily on the U.S., Canada started looking towards Asia. With the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, Canada could now export more oil directly to countries like China and Japan, reducing its reliance on the U.S. This move was smart, especially as demand for energy in Asia was growing rapidly. In short, Canada was sending a message. Don't push us too far, because we've got plenty of ways to fight back. That's not all. This energy relationship goes even deeper. Around 1.5 million Americans rely on Canada for their electricity. These are not small numbers, and if Canada were to cut off that power, it could lead to a major energy crisis in parts of the U.S. Imagine entire regions suddenly facing power shortages with no easy way to make up for the loss. It's not just a minor inconvenience. This could impact businesses, homes, and entire communities across the border. Let's take a closer look at the facilities that make this possible. One of the most significant power sources is the Robert Bourassa Generating Station in Quebec. This massive hydroelectric plant provides an enormous amount of electricity. Then there's Churchill Falls, another huge hydro plant in Newfoundland, and Labrador. Together, these facilities supply a massive chunk of the power that keeps lights on in the U.S., especially in states like New York and parts of the Northeast. Hydroelectric power is Canada's primary energy source, and the country has perfected the use of water to generate clean, renewable energy. With over 61% of its energy coming from hydroelectricity, Canada has built up a solid foundation of renewable power. This isn't just good for the environment, it's also good for business. Canada's hydro plants are not just about meeting domestic energy needs. They play a crucial role in the U.S. energy grid as well. And here's where it gets interesting. This energy exchange is a huge revenue source for Canada. In 2022 alone, Canada sold over 50 terawatt-hours of electricity to the U.S., bringing in a record $5.8 billion. That's a lot of money, and it's just one part of Canada's economic engine. While the U.S. benefits from reliable, clean energy, Canada's hydropower exports also help fuel its economy, creating jobs and boosting its green energy reputation worldwide. To make things even more interesting, Canada isn't just sitting back and waiting. Instead of continuing to rely heavily on the U.S., Canada has started focusing more on Europe and Asia. New trade deals like the CPTPP and CETA are opening up new markets, allowing Canada to reduce its dependence on its southern neighbor. The Trans Mountain Pipeline, which was expanded in 2024, is a key part of this shift. It now gives Canada the ability to send more oil to countries like China and Japan, which are hungry for energy. This move is a game changer, and it's reshaping Canada's trade strategy. The question is, how long can this reliance continue if tensions keep rising? The situation gets even more serious when you consider the resources Canada supplies to the U.S. Canada is a major supplier of oil, natural gas, aluminum, and nickel, resources that the U.S. heavily depends on. For example, over 97% of U.S. oil imports come from Canada, meaning any disruption in supply could send shockwaves through the U.S. energy system. Nickel, which is key for electric vehicle batteries, is becoming more important as the world moves toward cleaner energy. And don't forget, the U.S. relies on Canadian aluminum for manufacturing and defense. Cutting off these resources would create major economic problems. Canada holds massive reserves of oil, natural gas, uranium, and hydroelectric power. These resources aren't just vital to the U.S., they're also in high demand from countries like China and Japan. As global energy needs rise, Canada is positioning itself as an energy powerhouse. The reality is, many countries, including the U.S., rely on these resources. Losing access to them would cause major disruptions in energy markets worldwide, proving just how interconnected and essential Canada's resources are to the global economy. Canada isn't just sitting back and taking the pressure. There's a real sense of national pride building. People across the country are supporting local businesses more than ever. And it's not just a trend, it's a movement. The government is jumping in too, breaking down barriers between provinces to make it easier for businesses to thrive within Canada. The bigger picture here is Canada's push for economic independence. By reducing reliance on the U.S., Canada is strengthening its own economy and reducing vulnerability to external pressures. It's all about taking control of its future. So, what do you think? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more.